Also include Dhruv, who was missed out. Welcome, Dhruv. That's okay. So hi everybody, good afternoon. Thanks for attending this technical session. My name is Indradeep. I am Executive Director of Dwara Research. Dwara is a research and policy advocacy foundation, nonprofit, based in Chennai. That's where I'm based also. And we do research and policy advocacy in two specific domains, financial inclusion and social protection. And our research work is organized around 4 different research verticals. One vertical looks at financial systems design, so the overall design of the financial system. Another vertical looks at digital finance or digital inclusion. A third vertical studies the financial lives of low-income households. A fourth vertical looks at social protection. In India, financial inclusion and social protection are joined at the hip. So we study both domains. And then at the crossroads of these 4 verticals, we have a horizontal practice on customer protection. And all of the research that we do in these 4 different verticals feed into the customer protection work. And so we are doing a lot of work on financial customer protection, and it is in the context of that work that I have curated this panel to discuss how customer protection features in the impact measurement practices of impact investors. So I will start with a very short presentation, and once that presentation is complete, I will then introduce the panelists, and then we'll get into the discussion. Okay, so I have a couple of slides on measuring how financial inclusion efforts measure impact. And so we studied impact publications put out by a number of impact investors, some of whom are on the dais today. And our understanding is that impact investors measure the impact of financial inclusion efforts in 2 different ways. On the one hand, they develop their own impact metrics, which are relevant for the specific kinds of businesses they invest in. So different impact investors invest in different kinds of financial inclusion businesses. And so one way in which they measure impact is they create impact metrics that are relevant, that are pertinent to those businesses that they are investing in. But then there is also a set of reporting standards and audit requirements that are fast becoming the norm in the impact investing space, and also specifically in the financial inclusion impact investing space. And so many impact investors have started reporting according to these standards and audit requirements. So some of them are on the slide: UN SDG metrics, the IRS Plus metrics, 60 decibel survey, etc. Now, there is quite a bit of, there is a whole universe of impact metrics that impact investors in the financial inclusion space are tracking. But there are different ways to sort of categorize this universe of metrics. One way to perform the categorization is to say that there are of 2 types. One is that some of these metrics, they track the size or the reach of a financial service provider or of a investee company that is doing financial inclusion. And typically these take the form of the number of clients disaggregated by various characteristics like gender, location, etc. So typically a metric along this dimension will have this kind of a form, which is it will track the number of customers that particular financial institution is serving, and a provider is regarded as having a higher impact if they have a larger client base from particularly underserved client groups. And then there is also the direct impact on clients' lives of serving them with financial products and services. And so that direct impact is measured in various different ways. I will have a slide which will lay out some of these metrics in a little more detail. Another way of categorizing these metrics is that they fall into 3 different categories. So the first category is a category of process metrics or means metrics, which is how business conduct obligations are defined for the investee companies and how they are structured within the investee companies. And this is not just limited to how products and services are designed and delivered, but that is a very important component of these process metrics. A second set of metrics is usage metrics, which tend to track how intermediate ends or proximate ends are being achieved. And here what is being tracked is who uses the products and services that the investee companies are providing, and why is this usage impactful. And then the third category is outcome metrics, which measures how the usage of these kinds of innovative financial products and services is actually impacting the lives of customers. What about their financial lives is changing as a result of the use of these kinds of products and services. So here's a table with examples of these three different categories of metrics: process metrics, usage metrics, and outcome metrics. So you can see that process metrics also include the design of financial products and services. So things like product depth, product breadth, etc. Usage metrics track, like I said, the number of customers that are being served, and especially customers from underserved groups that are being served by the investee companies. So things like number of women borrowers, number of clients living in rural areas, etc. And then there is a set of outcome metrics which are trying to measure the actual impact, the downstream impact on the customers' lives of using these new kinds of products and services. So here, for example, improvement in the quality of life is a frequently tracked metric by investee companies for the investors. The improved ability to face major expenses. So if an emergency arises, how will the poor customer pull together, say, 5,000 rupees or 7,000 rupees? Is it easy to do that? Are the financial products and services allowing them to pull together emergency resources when they are needed? That is the kind of metric that is also being tracked. Now, when we look at all of this, so that, like I said, there is a universe of metrics. When we look at all of these metrics through a customer protection lens, because none of the metrics that we've seen so far has an explicit customer protection angle to it. Where our work meets the work of impact investors is that we are bringing a customer protection perspective to financial inclusion. And so the question we want to ask is that to what degree or to what extent are these impact metrics building in a concern for customer protection, financial customer protection. And so what does customer protection mean? In our work, we take a means ends view of financial customer protection. We say that customer protection is achieved when the financial products and services that customers are able to access have 5 different qualities or attributes or characteristics. Those products have to be relevant, they have to be affordable, they have to be accessible. I'm not defining these things because it's obvious what they mean. They have to be intuitive, especially for poor customers. Intuitiveness is very important, and they have to be trustworthy. So we believe that if financial products and services that are being sold to poor customers embody these attributes, these qualities, then the poor customer is adequately protected financially. But we also say that the way to embed these qualities or attributes into financial products and services is for the financial institution to embed certain kinds of business processes or certain kinds of actions in order to achieve those ends. So the means or the pathways to achieving those attributes in those financial products and services is, again, there are 5 different ways or pathways. So what that financial institutions can undertake in order to build in financial customer protection, that is, they can enhance product suitability, they can design products which are more suitable for poor customers. They can reduce information asymmetry, which is a particularly vexing problem for when you sell financial products and services to poor customers. They can improve grievance redress systems. They can reduce the incidence of frauds, and they can strengthen customer data protection. So these are the 5 pathways or the 5 means, and what you saw in the previous slide were the ends to which these means are applied. So we believe that when financial customer protection is framed in this way, it becomes possible to view impact creation as the instituting of business processes that produce these attributes in the financial products and services, because the ends that we have mentioned in the previous slide translate to the usage and outcome metrics, and the means that are mentioned on this slide translate into the process metrics. So what these 2 slides do is they build a bridge, conceptual bridge, from customer protection to impact metrics. And we believe that the overarching theme of customer protection offers a single, unifying, comprehensive framing around which impact measurement efforts can be organized. That is our thinking, and what we are here partly to do as Dwara Research is to learn from impact investors as to what they are already doing, about which we don't have enough information. So that is really the context for this panel. I have laid out a few questions for our panelists to tackle, and I will just briefly survey these questions. So one set of questions will be about the best practices that impact investors have already instituted in order to measure financial inclusion impact. So some of the questions which our panelists will tackle is: how is your organization measuring impact for its investee companies? Are there operational difficulties that you face in measuring impact? And how does your organization use that data that it collects from investee companies? The second set of questions will focus on explicitly building in a customer protection, explicitly or implicitly building in a customer protection perspective to impact measurement. And so here, the kinds of questions I will pose to panelists is, of those 5 attributes and those 5 pathways, how do they matter for the impact measurement exercises that you are already performing? And are there aspects of impact creation that we are missing, Dwara Research is missing, from that list that we put out there for those 5 ends and 5 means? And finally, the third set of challenges, a third set of questions address a very pragmatic trade-off that investors have to make, which is the trade-off between customer protection and business questions. And what we'll do is I'll ask one round of questions and we'll go around the panel once. And then I'll ask another round of questions and then we'll go around the panel a second time. And once we've done that, then we'll open it up for audience participation and Q&A. Okay? And to the panelists, I will just say that for each round, I will expect you to speak for about 5 minutes or so. But if it runs over, don't worry. I will maybe signal when the 5 minutes are over. But it's okay. Just, if you have things to say beyond 5 minutes, that's fine. And so we'll do one round of 5 minutes each and then another round of 5 minutes each. Okay. So my first question is to and I'll go alphabetically, which is how we have seated the panelists. So my first question is for Arya, who is representing Gojo. And I'd like her to speak on the first set of questions, which is, what are best practices at Gojo for its investee companies? And what kinds of operational challenges perhaps does Gojo face in collecting impact metrics? And also, how does it use those impact metrics?
Sure. Thanks, Indradeep, and very nice to be here with all of you. So a bit about Gojo, first of all. So Gojo was founded in 2014 with a mission to extend financial inclusion to all. We invest in financial services companies in developing countries that particularly serve low to medium income micro entrepreneurs. We're currently present in 5 countries and have invested in 8 companies, of which we own majority stake in like 6 companies. There are about 1.7 million loan and remittance clients that we serve and 300K savings clients as well. In terms of social performance and impact measurement, the objective of us doing this, first of all, is to ensure client protection, but also to learn about the kind of impacts that we are creating on our clients, understand the gaps, and see how we can bridge those gaps. So learning is the objective here. And there are, say, 2 buckets that I would, sort of put our efforts into. In terms of social performance management, first of all, what we try and do is conduct audits, social audits for our group companies, once every 3 years at least. And these audits involve, a rigorous, it's an intensive 6-month process of looking at multiple dimensions, including whether the company has a social strategy to achieve the mission it is set out to achieve. Does it define KPIs to measure? Does it collect data? Is the management and the leadership committed enough to create this impact? Does it design products based on users' needs? Are client protection principles being adhered to in terms of being transparent about product terms, having a grievance redressal system, preventing over-indebtedness, and so on. So likewise, there are a bunch of topics that we look at in our social performance audits, and it's a very intensive process where we conduct about 30 to 40 interviews in the field with clients, with staff, with the board, etc. And then we devise a set of, list the set of gaps that we've identified and work with our group companies over the course of the year or 2 to bridge those gaps. So that's one set of initiatives that we do. The second set of activities around impact measurement, like Indradeep sort of briefed, we look at output numbers, mostly in terms of number of clients, number of women we're reaching, number of rural clients, and so on. And this information mostly comes from our core banking systems or management information systems. In terms of measuring outcomes that our clients experience, we've designed a client-centric framework, which is essentially a financial well-being framework, that we envision in terms of the impact we want to see in our clients' lives. At the end of the day, we want our clients to feel like they have control over their money, right? Like they're able to earn a decent living, they're able to spend for their needs and wants, they're able to save and invest for the future or tackle emergencies and so on. So based on these, we have a set of KPIs that we have identified and a set of indicators that we want to gather data on, from our impact surveys and so on. And the primary method of understanding how clients experience our products and services is through in-house surveys like client satisfaction surveys or dropout studies, where we try and understand why did clients exit the organization. And these often cover questions around the products and the services, right? Like, are they really meeting their needs? What would they like differently? They also cover client protection questions around, did they understand the product terms at the time of disbursement? Was the nearest branch or so near to their place? Like, was it accessible and so on? So it covers a lot of accessibility, like product and service related questions, and also client protection questions. To understand the impact we have on clients, we also do impact surveys, but last year we participated in the 60 decibel surveys because it allows us to benchmark our impact with that of other financial services institutions, right? So we conduct these surveys, again, look at the gaps, work with the management to bridge the gaps. So that's how we use the impact data. Other than all of this, we also do research projects. So what we involve in is called the Financial Diaries Project. It's very interesting. We've done it in 2 countries, in Cambodia and Sri Lanka, where we shortlist about 100 low-income households and request them to maintain a diary of their income and expenses for over a year. And then we study this data to understand how low-income households manage money. And the idea is that we understand how poor people manage money better, but also develop some ideas for products and services that we want to offer in the future. In terms of some of the challenges that we face with impact measurement, some of the data that we'd have liked to look at is often in paper forms and not really in the core banking systems, and the data is not really structured enough for us to like analyze and get insights on in an easy fashion. So that's one thing. And the other thing is, even to get the data and the information, I think it takes time. So we often have to make a data request to our partners, and then it takes about 20 to 30 days for them to prepare the data in that format and send it back to us, and then for us to analyze. So periodic monitoring or analysis becomes difficult. So what we're trying to do now is create dashboards, which can help us get data on a more frequent basis, maybe quarterly or so that we can look at data more frequently. Yeah, I think that's a good summary of what Gojo is trying to do.
Thanks, Arya. So let me move on to Dhruv. So Dhruv, what do you do at Blue Orchard in terms of impact measurement, and what do you do with those metrics?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, thanks Indradeep for curating the session. Super interesting discussion, and thanks to the Access guys for organizing. It's always a very well organized event, and nice for the overseas lenders, a good opportunity to meet various counterparties. So yeah. Coming to what I do at Blue Orchard, or maybe what Blue Orchard does, we are an impact asset management company that's been around since 2001. So quite a long track record of investing in microfinance companies. The initial idea, we're a microfinance investment vehicle, which means that we were set up with the objective to mobilize capital from large DFIs to microfinance companies around the world. Since then, the mandate has shifted or expanded well beyond microfinance, but certainly microfinance remains at the forefront of what we do. We've invested in about 80 countries across LATAM, Africa, Central Europe, Eastern Europe, and Asia. Within Asia, India's traditionally been our largest market, along with Cambodia. So yeah, well versed with the country, obviously. We've been able to use this kind of 20-year track record to develop our own in-house sort of bespoke impact framework. And the impact framework is really made up of sort of three sort of important components. If I have to break it down, it's the ESG risk assessment, our impact measurement model, and mapping to the UN SDG goals. So coming to the first, which is our sort of first layer of check, a very baseline, what we do is the ESG risk assessment. For any company that we're looking to work with, that we're looking to onboard onto our platform, we need to study their policy documents to understand if they're even eligible to move to the next stage, whether they have the requisite client protection principles in place to make sure there's no harm being done to the client. This involves not only looking at policy documents, we also do our background checks on the kinds of people we're working with. Might be nice that they've set up a microfinance company, but in the background they have major interests in oil mining in Africa, for example. So need to be aware of who we're working with. That's a very sort of standard-based check. We assign an ESG risk assessment score. Ideally, a low ESG risk would be something that's needed for us to move forward with the onboarding of a company. And then once we've done that, we really get to the sort of impact measurement, and we develop an impact scorecard for every single loan that we give out. And it's important because once we've onboarded a company, we might provide multiple rounds of funding. We also do, it's not just private debt, we do private equity, listed debt, and infrastructure debt. So we're really looking to work with these companies on many different products. Each of those specific instruments need to have an impact score assigned out of 100, and I think it's important to quantify the actual impact, similar to maybe like a credit scoring. So our organization, takes it very seriously. The kind of, in terms of what goes into this impact scorecard, we're really looking at number one, the objective. What's the intent of the loan? Are we looking to, for example, expand finance to women in rural India? We're looking at quantifying in terms of KPIs. So what kind of targets are you looking to achieve? Again, important because all said and done, you give out a loan saying go expand access to finance in rural India, but what kind of targets are you actually looking to achieve so that you're able to see if the actual loan is successful on an impact basis or not. Then we also look at the contribution of our investments. So I think it's important because, and when I say contribution of our investment, I'm talking about what's the value add of the funding from Blue Orchard vis-a-vis a local bank, for example, or another lender. Is the tenor longer? Is there a larger ticket size? Is there some technical assistance that we can provide apart from the financing? So yeah. The final aspect of our impact scorecard is assessing any possible risks that may be apparent that could prevent this loan from actually achieving the impact required. Could be regulatory risks, could be macroeconomic risks. Is there some possible risk that may lead to the impact not being generated? And eventually we come to an impact scorecard out of 100. The idea obviously being the twin goal of low ESG risk. So there's a low risk of working with this company in terms of ESG, but high impact. In terms of, again, the score out of 0 to 100, we should have a high impact score. The third sort of facet to our framework is just aligning with the UN SDG goals, and this is important for protecting investor
of social science. So I'm not surprised that that's a challenge. Coming to Netra. Netra, tell us what Axion is doing, and also I'd love to hear from you on the idea of intangible impacts and how you all are proposing to measure these intangible impact creations.
Yeah, so I think maybe I'll just to take a step back. Axion is a not-for-profit organization, been around in the space of financial inclusion for 60 years. And it kind of goes across. We look at investments, we do research, we also have a team of advisory. And so when we are thinking about impact measurement at an organizational level, we built a framework which kind of overlaps with some of the points that you mentioned under process and usage really. And so we identified categories of metrics that we would track across the different teams in investment advisory and research. So those categories broadly fall under access, quality, and for us, as an investment team, we look at catalytic capital, like what is the kind of capital you're able to attract in this segment. And for those who are not in investments, you're looking at transformational business models. How many of the transformational business models have you worked with? But we kind of, if I have to kind of zoom in to how we as investments look at it, in Axion we have multiple themes of investments. We have the Axion Venture Lab, which is an early stage investor in the fintech space. We do make investments from the balance sheet, where the thesis is a little bit more fluid because we're really just testing business models. And the team that I'm part of, which is the Digital Transformation Fund, and here for us, it's really working with scaled microfinance institutions and MSME lenders, and what is the role that digital transformation plays in helping them build that scale. And so when we are looking at our impact framework, in addition to these three, we also look at another category, which is digital engagement. So within these broad categories, we have identified certain metrics that we target, that we track for these companies. I mean, I think similar to something that Dhruv also touched upon, for us when we are looking at impact, that's pretty much a very important element for us through the investment cycle. So when we're kind of talking about the initial thesis of the investment, why we're looking to invest, the impact part is always very important. And from there on, so that becomes very important even in our conversation with promoters. What is their vision for the company? Are they very focused on how they're looking at their customer segment and how they're looking to build out impact? Is there a possibility that they may stray from that vision of, moving up the customer segment, right? So those are some of the things that we test. But through that process, what we also see is, I think as investors, it's important for us is what is the support that we can provide to help them achieve some of these goals that they have in mind. And so what we have as a team is we have developed this framework of saying, let's identify 3 goals, impact goals for the company, and say over the next 5 years, we work with them in helping them achieve the goal. Now, it's more of a, I have to say, a best effort basis, because you really don't want to hold them to that metric. But it also, in a way, helps us focus as an investors to say that, hey, you got a great business model, but let's see how we can get you to the next stage, to the next level on, say, some goals. So to give you an example, gender participation could be one. Can we get the current employee strength is maybe 5% women? In the next 5 years, what can we do to get you to 10%? And we as investors, what is the role that we can play to help you get to that 10%? I think this has helped us as investors to be also focused, because for all the third-party metrics that you were talking about, and because we also have our own investors, we tend to track a lot of metrics, and then you take a step back and say, now what do I do with those metrics, right? So this is just easier for us to say, this is fine. And so we have these broad categories that we will continue to track, and it's a great story to talk about in what the company has done. But for us, the more important thing is, what are we doing as investors and helping them get to that, right? It cannot just be about metrics. And so it's really about leveraging market expertise. What is it that we can do in providing, say, could be improving digital engagement for women borrowers, really seeing what is it that we are doing, what are maybe partners like the advisory team doing, and how can we leverage that expertise and bring that to our portfolio companies. So that's how we kind of look at impact measurement for the fund that we're working on.
Down, because when Vuthi speaks, I want to be able to hear her. But your voice is filtering through, I can hear it. So Vuthi, I know that you are mostly handling the debt investments for Incofin. I know that Incofin also makes equity investments. It'd be great if you could tell us what impact measurement looks like for debt investments, and if there are any differences between debt and equity investments in terms of measuring impact.
So thank you, Indradeep, for these questions. And I have the privilege, to handle the debt investment. And at one point, as introduced by you as well, I've been involved in our equity monitoring investment. So in that cases, I can share, some of this experience. But regardless of you talk about that on equity, at the end of the day, it's considered to be an investment. It's just a different instrument, right? So for us as an impact investment and managers, so we wanted to deliver a double bottom line approach, our objective to our investors and also toward our investee, meaning we are not just, wanted to deliver the financial return, but at the end of the day, also wanted to deliver impacts to these end clients of our investee, as well as, guiding them toward this impact journey, right? So with that, maybe I can just take a quick look at what is Incofin is doing in that regard. As built in our DNA, we position our missions that we invest for impact, not just with impact, right? For impact and to drive inclusive progress and sustainable transition. What does that mean? It means, we look for inclusion at every aspect that we are doing, and we want to build a better world for the next generations, than what we do now. So for our impact strategy, we come with the right intentions to invest with a meaningful impact. So for example, taking into one of our equity investment in a leasing company in Myanmar, for example, as a leasing company that is wanted to deliver to rent the motorcycle, to the customer, and later on offering other products like what we call black good or white good, like mini mobile phones and home appliance and all these sorts. So this from a product perspective, it's clear, right? The impact to the end client is for them to, to get access to the right transportation mode, to, increase, to support their business, increase income in terms of household appliance and mobile phone. It's not just, for normal consumption. In the digitalization world, people are using mobile phone for a lot of things, and it's also contributed to their business income. So from an output and outcome perspective, it's clear, but from the impact perspective, what else should we be looking at? Okay, this type of business is generally a fast turning around money, and that could mean, a risk to client protections, which I actually wanted to combine these two. That's what Indradeep, you already mentioned. It's very important for us then when we put in our investment in this type of company, we come with an impact mindset and the mindset of, not just generating financial return out of the client, but to, build awareness within this company to also build in their impact measurement, with the outcomes that you wanted to achieve. So how does this improve the quality, of life of your borrowers, and what could be the size negative effect that you could avoid? Then there were some, introductions on certain projects to help them look at, the type of product that could impact the climate in a way, for example, rather than looking at just a normal motorcycle, maybe, start looking at an EV and all these sort. Okay, from an external contact or product level perspective, it may be a time-consuming process toward that, but this is the impact journeys or that we are following with our investee in terms of value creation, and continue to measure the impact, and we put forward a clear milestone for them, what to achieve. One of which is also with regard to the client protection, because when you work with consumer financing, you tend to think about it as a fast-turning money, so it's important that, collection practice and everything is within the responsible financing standard. So we put as a milestone for them, like, okay, in the next 2-3 years, you need to obtain the client protection principle certification, for example, right? That's on the equity side. On the debt side, a lot of us here in the panelists already mentioned before me, there's different tools generally within an impact investment fund or investors that is looking at investee. At Blue Orchard, for example, Drew mentions about, the internal tool that they're trying to build, but okay, aligned with the universal standard. At Incofin, we also have an internal tools, right, which we align completely with the universal social and environmental performance standard, which we, it's a set of questions with 7 dimensions ranging from, governance, human capital, social, environmental, and impact, including client protection, where then we give a score to our investee based on that, and then to see, to track over time whether there's an improvement and whether there's areas that we can come in to support them to improve those. And in terms of this, Incofin have what we call a Capital Plus strategy. In addition to providing financing, we are also offering technical assistance to support, our investment. And on the impact side, I think one of the questions you want to pose on the challenges of, getting external certification, for example. technical assistance that we provide could also be there. But the 60 decibel that Arya mentions and the client protection certifications are the two main impact measurements tool or means that we use for our investment. Thank you.
Thank you, Vuthi. So I'm just going to go back around the circle, but I'll start with you this time and just walk backwards. So, and this time around, maybe you just have 3 minutes because I do want to give the audience an opportunity to engage with our panelists. So what I'd like to, like you, Vuthi, to speak to is this trade-off. And maybe you already touched on that, but if you could just draw it out in a sharper relief, this trade-off that investors have to make between customer protection and profitability.
Right. So this, like it's a tricky question whether in what positions are you in, an investor and an investee. So at the end, a trade-off, but we need to find the balance. So balance here, what does that mean? When you prioritize growth, it does not have to be a sacrifice of the others metric, which is on the social side, right? Maybe I start with an example in the markets where I'm coming from. So I'm Cambodian, as you are aware, and if anyone follow Cambodian market, it's a very challenging market environment, exactly that in terms of, like, are you prioritizing growth and you are sacrificing, like the social aspect, meaning the impact that you would like to achieve with regard to the financial inclusion, right? So it's a very challenging situations, but like investors and different stakeholders need to work hands in hand. What's important is that you are not just ticking the box, meaning Cambodia is one of the mature market. It's if any of the raters or any of investors who are working in Cambodia's market is fully aware that it's a market that is quite mature, it's quite very good in terms of a policy and procedure. Like how many institutions in Cambodia itself that have a gold client protection certifications itself, right? Despite that, this is still a market where like there's noise on irresponsible financing, right? You are not taking care of a client, but how come could that be if you already have a gold certification? So that's, like where we wanted to say the label is a label. You have been having good policy and procedures, but not just ticking the box, but about implementation and enforcement. You are not complacent, right? By the fact that I know that, I know it all. I have been doing this for so many years, but things evolve. So if you if you put client on the forefront, client-centric approach, right? It's, like do everything to support your client. If you cannot make much positive impact, the minimal you can do is doing no harm. So if you put that in the forefront and build in your strategy from the topmost governance, like to the bottom until the field level officer, that's not going to work. And this is exactly what I can see a bit happening in Cambodia's market, where like growth has becoming a priority of the institution because of the shift of the investor there to more commercial. And then, despite they are aware that client is important and they need to grow with the client, there seem to be some misalignments in that. So balancing both would be the important action. So both supply side and the demand side. Please, last word I want to mention on this. You can do so much on the supply side, right? But this is a two-way relationship. So at the end of the day, like financial literacy and awareness from the clients need to work, and then you have the mechanism, to pull all of this through. That's where we would like to see things happening in Cambodia. And if anyone further interested on these matters, stay tuned, and I'm happy to further contribute. Thank you.
Thank you, Vuthi. Netra, coming to you, can you tell us how Axion manages this trade-off, and if you could give us some insights into business models at scale and how that impacts the focus on customer protection?
So I have a slightly different view. I don't see this as a trade-off. I really think it actually has an impact on profitability. Incidentally, we are actually facing this challenge like real time now in one of the markets that we're looking at, where the government has, the regulator has imposed interest rate caps. And over the next 2 years, they are going to see interest rate, they would like the interest rates to come down by almost 6 percentage points, which is going to have an impact on profitability. But I think it does, and I think we've seen this in India also, right? A couple of years, quite a number of years ago. And I think it's good for the industry overall, because one, you do have companies who, to the point that she mentioned, taking a customer-centric approach in terms of product design, in terms of, and so they're taking a bit of a long-term view on how they're going to look at engaging the customer in terms of product, in terms of measuring usage, all of those things. And so customer protection then becomes very much a very important part of it. And I think companies get that because they've also seen the other side of it, right? When you are not educating the customer enough on responsible financing, invariably it leads to over-indebtedness, and that results in higher credit costs, which ultimately affects your profitability. And so I think, I do think, I mean, we have seen companies who really understand the importance of it. And so one of the things that we require our companies to do is to get that the client protection certification done. While the good thing is in a lot of the countries, regulator itself requires this whole fair practice conduct. But this kind of also gets into a little bit more detail of thinking about your credit underwriting, thinking about product development, communication, grievance mechanism, everything. So all that becomes very important. And I do think that while you may not see the short-term benefit, but you are kind of, it's important to also, I guess, give that company the perspective as to how this is going to have that impact on profitability. So personally, I don't really see this as a trade-off. It's really very much important for profitability.
Thank you, Netra. Their customers improve their credit scores. And when that kind of improvement is happening over the financing cycle, that is clearly also a good thing for profitability and business model sustainability. So again, coming to you and your experience at MSDF, is there a trade-off? And if there is, how do you all manage it?
I think I'll echo what was said before me here as well. We at MSDF also don't think that there is a trade-off as such, right? You know, the aspects of access and viability for the customer, the do no harm or the customer protection piece, as well as the impact on the final customer or borrower, I think they need to go hand in hand to have that vibrant market where you're seeing that sustainability of the business over time. And I'll give a few tangible examples of this. One is what we saw in the MFI space a few years back, well actually many years back now, around 2010, where the competition really grew, the market kind of intensified, and we saw things kind of fall through, right? That's where we realized that, and MSDF invested in the social performance indicators that Arya, you were talking about earlier, just to ensure that we're looking at the aspect of what companies are doing in terms of their mission, what are they investing in, what kind of customers are they working with, what kind of transparency they have with those customers. But at the same time, looking at some of those longer impacts, like one of the areas within that social performance framework was around the PPI index, or the coming out of poverty. I'm forgetting the actual acronym, but essentially like how many of the borrowers are actually coming out of poverty by accessing the financial credit that they're availing of. And so having such sort of frameworks which companies can use to not just highlight the transparency of the lenders, but also the impact that they're finally having on the borrowers. They need to go hand in hand for a market, specifically as the market grows, as the market intensifies. So that is one example. The second thing to highlight is that while there is that piece of, internally kind of for a company managing that to say that if they do good, they will also do well financially. There is also in some cases, external pressure, especially in a nascent market. And so right now for us, for instance, we work in a nascent market with this entrepreneur space, right? And there you need some external incentives, external concessions. And that's something, again, we saw with those, the social performance metrics 10 years back, where we actually worked with CGAP to give some kind of like rewards and incentives to companies which were adopting those social performance indicators. And we actually tend to believe that something similar might be needed at this point as well. Whether that's a credit rating system, whether that's something else, but just to incentivize from the outside as well, especially when the market is maturing, when they're still figuring out a viable business model. This is what needs to be done. Till the time businesses realize that, hey, this is actually good for us as well, we need to focus on this so that customers come back to us. And I'll just say a quick anecdote to that. So I recently visited, a borrower of one of our investee companies. This was in Pune. And this person, he's actually a high school dropout who took a loan from one of our investee companies about 4 years back to set up a stall for tea and snacks. He topped up the loan 2 years later and set up his own full commercial kitchen to supply full lunch boxes to the factories around. And so that is a great example of, the company treating that borrower well, and therefore that borrower coming back to the business and saying, I want to top up the loan, which is an interest of that, company as well.
On this trade-off, if you see it as a trade-off at Blue Orchard.
Yeah, sure. So I think I'm kind of aligned with what Bhuti said, what a lot of what she said, and I think it's interesting. In India, you look at the microfinance sector, the annual growth rates, and we probably have some practitioners here, is like 30-40%, right? In India, that's an acceptable number given the size of the population and obviously the scale, but then you have neighboring countries or other markets in Asia, and Bhuti talked about Cambodia, where you also have 30% annual growth rate with a population that's barely 1/10 the size. So obviously something isn't adding up, right? The market's quite saturated, but still these MFIs are continuing to report huge growth numbers. And not to say that we don't see it in India as well. Okay, there's a big market, but there's obviously concerns about over-leveraging and over-aggressive growth numbers. And I think it's a bit of a trade-off because these companies are looking, they're fairly early stage companies that I think everybody here is looking at. So they obviously need to show growth, need to show profitability in order to keep attracting capital and sort of, in their defense, they need to attract capital to expand financial inclusion, right? But it comes a point where you say that, you're increasing the number of beneficiaries, but is your product actually correct for what the market needs? And again, I would say that the MFIN, the RBI, or whoever else has come up with these sort of measures to change the microfinance model and evolve the microfinance model in India has actually done a very good job, because it's moved away from, initially we had a product, and I'm sorry I'm talking a lot about microfinance, but that's a lot of what we do. You have a product that, you get a group of women together and you're giving them all the same ticket size loan for same tenor and same, everything needs to be matched for that joint liability concept to be in place. But in reality, the women may need the loans at different times, they need different ticket sizes, they need different, it might be seasonal, someone's needs it for farming, someone needs to buy a new cattle so it's important that the product, and this is talked about a lot in your paper, right? It needs to be suited to what the client actually needs, as opposed to just, trying to show a higher number of beneficiaries, trying to show growth rates and attract more capital. So that's something that'll take time to kind of be worked on.
Thank you, Dhruv. So my final question is to Arya. And here I bring the focus back to customer protection and impact measurement. And I'd like to ask Arya how Gojo thinks about customer protection as an integral feature of impact measurement, because I know that you have your client-centric framework. So if you could tell us a little more about that client-centric framework and how you think about customer protection, that'd be great.
Sure. I think, you know, like everybody said, customers are at the heart of the business, right? And it's important for us to be close to the clients as much as possible. So in our impact measurement practices, and by doing all of these audits and so on, that's the effort here. Now, in terms of client protection itself, like there was a lot of mention of client protection certifications and social performance audits and so on here. So that's very important for Gojo. We also require our companies to acquire client protection certifications. And in the angle of, or in the interest of protecting clients or having their best interest in mind, we also focus on you know, some of the product attributes and service attributes that you sort of described, such as the products being relevant to the customers. We try and understand it through some of our surveys, you know, to really hearing from them as to how they experience these products and services. We also place a great emphasis on having good complaints mechanisms or grievance redressal mechanisms. Interestingly, you know, just last week I was in Cambodia, and despite having like policies and practices to make sure that there is a call center number in your loan contracts, and you know, you inform clients of the ways to complain and so on, it's very interesting to see some of the clients who actually were illiterate and could not really even identify where the number is on a loan contract, right? So it's insights like these that further help us refine the way in which we communicate with our clients, or you know, simplify the messaging and so on, so that they can actually make use of some of these things. In terms of some of the gaps that you know are also present. I think we talk a lot about data protection and data privacy and so on for clients, but we're talking about an end customer who is probably a fisherman and is, you know, taking a loan to renew his, build a toilet in his house and so on, and is struggling to put food on his table. So sometimes these topics are not as relevant for them in their day-to-day context. So when we're thinking about these concepts and topics, it's important for us to also keep that in mind and you know, think of it in the context of their everyday life and their situation, right? Another aspect of ensuring client protection and impact is that I feel we haven't spoken much about here is about employee well-being and their role in how they treat these clients. At the end of the day, the field staff or the frontline staff they're the face of the company for the client. The loan officer is the person that the client, you know, interacts with the most probably, right? If they are delinquent or unable to repay, he's the person that they most often call and talk to. So trying to make sure that employees are taken care of well, they're paid decently or well, they're incentivized in the right ways. The productivity ratios are not too high. You know, they're managing like a decent amount of clients, but not too much, and are not experiencing way too much pressure to like sell aggressively to them. That these employees are receiving adequate training on what's an acceptable practice in terms of treating clients and what's unacceptable, especially in the face of, for example, delinquency, and when they're going to, you know, clients' homes to recollect money and so on. So I think that's another aspect of client protection that needs to be looked at. And at Gojo, when we set impact goals or social goals on an annual basis, that's also something we look at in terms of employee satisfaction and retention. And it's an aspect we cover in our audits as well, in depth. So yeah, I hope that.
Thank you, Arya. No, great insights. So I think we have a little time for audience. 5 minutes? Okay. So 5 minutes for audience Q&A. If anybody in the audience has a question for one of our panelists. Yes, sir. Can we?
My question is around the financial inclusion. One of the biggest challenge which one of customer segment which is MSME and which is purely the micro MSME customers in India. Because I'm saying this because of my experience of meeting 500 micro MSMEs personally when I started my NBFC. The biggest challenge is that today when any micro customer required any kind of a loan, for a machinery loan, he need to move some specific NBFC or bank for the machine loan. For the working capital, he need to move to some different NBFC. Then for stock creation, he need to move some different NBFC. What do you think is there in India? My view is that there has to be a one-stop solution for these kind of a customer, where somebody can understand their journey of life cycle of their business, start from and then to the end. So, and single solution or single lending solution for them, instead of moving around so many NBFCs and then giving the data to so many NBFCs and then challenging that. So I just wanted to have a view of the panelists on this specific challenge of the MSMEs.
Yeah, maybe I can start off and someone can chip in when I stop making sense. But it's a good question. I think it's easier said than done, and I think there have been cases of where some NBFCs have tried this, where you become maybe a wealth manager to a low income household, right? Where it's not just maybe, like you said, not just a microfinance loan or a gold loan where you have to go to different NBFCs to get. There should be one NBFC that's able to cater to all your needs and maybe even advise the household on what they need, and that comes back to client protection principles. The issue I really see is, and I think the NBFCs I'm talking about have faced problems where you build your credit underwriting models and your systems to cater to a specific product, and you build a speciality on that particular product. When you try and expand to far too many products, there's a chance where you could go wrong in terms of your own credit underwriting. And I'm thinking more from the NBFC's perspective, the risk that they take. I think there's challenges in terms of their ability to underwrite a wide variety of products. But yeah, if anyone else has it.
No, I think actually we've kind of seen that model evolve. We're talking about microfinance institutions providing group lending, now seeing value in moving up the customer to individual loans because they understand, there's a cash flow, there's a business. And then you have a lot of these NBFCs now going the small finance bank routes or the universal bank routes, where, to your point, they effectively provide all those products to the customer segment that the MFI that started 10 years ago understands very well. So you do have those models. I do think that it's a journey even for the financial institution and for the customer, their own maturity of being able to understand the concept of debtedness and all of it, right? So that's how I see it.
Okay, so are we out of time? Okay. Do you have a question? Does anyone have a question? One last. Okay. So let's end the session. I'm sorry that we don't have more time for audience participation, but I did want to let the panelists speak, because this is again a topic that you won't read about online or in the public domain. So it was important for us to hear what they have to say, and thank you all for participating, for being so patient with my questions, and for enlightening us about the impact measurement practices that impact investors are using. We have certainly learned a lot. I hope the audience has learned, and there's a lot that we can take away, Dwara Research can take away from this conversation and think about. So thank you again.
Thank you so much, panelists.